my mother was born in Christchurch, New Zealand, and grew up in Wellington. She was born in 1923. And she loved art as a young girl, and she went to what she always called art school. It was it's now what's known as a polytechnic. It still exists, and it teaches various practical skills. And she became a commercial artist, and she all her life drew and painted. And during the war, she was variously a nurse and she joined the Women's Air Force and worked on radar, you know, sitting in a big room and looking at blips on radar and waiting for the Japanese to invade New Zealand, as they never did, of course, but though they did get to Northern Australia. They bombed Darwin at one stage, but nothing ever happened in New Zealand. She wasn't a very good nurse. She was very, very slight. She looked as though a puff of wind would blow her away, and I have a picture of her with her other nursing friends, and they're good, sturdy young women, you know, healthy and strong. Yeah. And there's Mum looking like someone acting a nurse. She's very pretty. She's got her hair up. She's got red lipstick, got this tiny little waist, and she's sort of, yeah, nursing didn't suit her. Anyway, her elder brother was in the Royal Navy and had quite an exciting time in the Mediterranean during the war. And then after the war, he settled in London, and he married an Israeli woman who she was born in Munich. She's still alive. She's coming up for 100. Now, that's a very interesting story. I won't go into it, otherwise I'll get sidetracked. But
okay.
But my mother's family name, you should understand, was Oppenheim. So we had a Jewish ancestor. But of course, if it's on the male side, you aren't Jewish. It has to be your mother to be Jewish. So we had that sort of tradition in the family, but we weren't actually Jewish. But my Uncle Harry did actually marry a Jewish person. So my mother, after the war in the early 50s, went to London to stay with her brother, who was newly married and living in West London. And now there are two versions to this story as to how she met Stefan. There was the one she told me when I was, I suppose, about 10 or 12. And then there was the one she told my husband, Colin. And I think the one she told him was true. But I don't really see the reason for making up a story about it, because the version she told Colin didn't seem to me to be a problem. But anyway, what she told me was that she spent her free time going to art galleries and looking at exhibitions, and because she'd been starved of art in provincial New Zealand, and she wanted to see all the art she could and look at real art and real new art. And her story was that she went to an exhibition of Stefan's in the gallery, and he popped up beside her and started chatting her up. And I always accepted that. I thought, well, that's very nice. They got to know each other, and then he hired her as an assistant to grind the pigments for his, because the pigments had to be particularly fine in order for him to use them for his enamel. Okay.
Yeah.
And I still have a little enamel brooch she made in his workshop. She was allowed to do a little bit of playing with, you know, a little bit that size. Okay, so then what she told Colin, and I think this is the true story, is that she answered an ad in the paper for an artist's assistant. She thought, oh, a real artist, I'll work for a real artist. And he wrote back to her, because of course it will have been post office boxes and letters, because that was how things were done in those days, and said, come to the gallery at such and such a time. And I suspect he wanted to get a look at her and see if she was, you know, presentable.
Presentable assistant.
Well, you know, yes, exactly. If she'd been, yeah, well, yeah. Anyway, she must have come up to his standards, because he did come and speak to her, and so she started working for him and grinding the pigments, and obviously it went a bit further than that. But I didn't hear many stories about him. I heard I heard two which indicated something about his temperament. One was that they were walking through Hyde Park together in the snow in the winter, and he picked her up and he just spun her round and round and round. I mean, she was very light. She weighed about 7 stone, and he just spun her round and round and round and round, an aeroplane spin. I thought that was quite nice. But the other thing was, he was naughty. He rang her up one day. He used to call her Peggy. Her name was Cicely, but she was always known as Peggy, but in the Polish accent it came out a bit as Piggy. She said, oh, Peggy, I am so lonely. The trials of the life of an artist is so hard, and there is nothing to eat in the house, and I have nothing, no heating, and nothing to drink. Oh, she says, so she rushes out and she buys a bottle of wine and some bread and some food, and she rushes round to the studio. And when she gets there, he's done the same to a dozen other people, and there was a party going on, and this was not what she had hoped for.
Oh, wow. That's a tricky part, yes.
Yeah. And then, now what was the other thing? Oh yes, when she told him she was expecting me, of course, by that time the other Stefanie had already made her appearance, because Stefanie was born in October 54 and I was born in August 55. So there's poor Stefan. He didn't want these women to know about each other, and my mother never did know about the other one. Started to say, think how happy your parents will be to be grandparents. Think how lovely it will be for them back in New Zealand to have a little baby to love and look after. He was quite right, of course. My grandparents didn't do the never darken my door again sort of thing that did sometimes happen to women who gave birth out of wedlock. My mother changed her name by deed poll to Kingsley, so she came back with a sort of respectable cover, Mrs. Kingsley.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow.
Because in the 50s that was quite important. And she moved back in with her parents. So I grew up, I was very doted on, very spoiled probably, in a house with 4 generations, because there was me and my mother and my grandparents. My grandfather died when I was about 10, 11. And my great-grandmother, my grandmother's mother, who was quite a character. She was a Londoner, a real Londoner. And I think she sometimes found life in New Zealand extremely boring. But I was very fond of her. She used to recite poetry to me. She knew all sorts of rhymes and comical rhymes, and her great performance was Meddlesome Matty, which was one of those Victorian cautionary tales. It was written in about 1830, and it was about a little girl who got into her grandmother's snuff box. I mean, snuff box. I wouldn't have known what a snuff box was, but anyway, great grandma used to wonderful performance, and I used to beg her to do it because she was so good at it. So, I mean, it was an interesting childhood, but I think it was probably very bad for my mother just to go back home and live with mum and dad and never really set foot out again. She worked as a commercial artist. She did a lot of painting of her own. I've still got a lot of the painting that she did. And she did her best by me. She really did, but she was quite a difficult woman. And I think it was probably, she was very, she found life quite frustrating. And after Stefan, all the men she met seemed very dull. And so, I mean, I don't think she would have coped with Stefan. She would have needed to be quite strong. You know, Yvonne, for instance, Robin's mother, was a tough egg. And she was able to, I think, cope with and stay friends with Stefan. And but I don't think my mother could have. It would have been very, very difficult for her. It was very useful because Yvonne remembered my mother. And so when Kathy said, "Who is this woman?" saying she's Stefan's, I've never heard of her. She's saying she's Stefan's daughter. Who is she? Yvonne was able to say, oh yes, I remember her mother. And Robin said to me that, oh yes, we always knew there was someone in Australia. Also, because people often confuse Australia and New Zealand. It's the surest way to offend New Zealand.
Yes.
You know, it's a bit like saying to a Canadian, "Oh, you come from the States." No, I don't. Yes, it's so so that was quite useful, I think.
So they don't have a contacts for this, as you said, 35 years, no?
No, my mother used to write to him and send photographs, and that was when Kathy thought about it, she remembered she had seen, when she was going through Stefan's effects after he died, she had seen a little photo of a little blonde, curly-headed toddler with Stefanie 2.5 years written on the back, and she'd looked at it and she said, "That's not Stefanie." But of course it was, but it was me, not
Yes.
whom I never met. She died before I.
So I will tell you this story on our side. So I think it's quite similar to this what you have from Robin. So we always knew that there is someone somehow in New Zealand, Australia. So it was like, everybody in the family knew about it.
Yeah.
Because I think Stefan was way more open in Belgrade than in London. There was also some kind of things which I didn't understand those times when he communicated with me, because I was like teenager when we spoke last time, and we communicate quite well, I would say so. But for example, there was things like he didn't ask, or he didn't like that we spoke or tried to teach Polish to his wife or his sons and so on, because he don't really would like to know them what is going on. There was so many different secrets that he he understood that there are in Poland, I would say, or they are spoken in Poland somehow, yes. So he don't want that, for example, Katie knew Polish, because if Katie knew Polish, then it will be a problem, because it was quite safe environment for him. Nobody in Belgrade speak English, and Katie don't speak Polish. You understand the meaning of the fact that. And it was strange for me those times. Yes, I didn't understood really why it's like, secret language or whatever. Why is the reason there? Yes, and later all these things came and it was super funny. It was super funny.
But I think I understand that Kathy and Stephanie had a very, very tortured relationship, and I can just imagine how well it would have gone down if Stefan had gone to her and said, "Guess what? There's another one." Yeah, because she, for all she knew, I would be another. Well, I mean, I don't really know what Stefanie was like, but I gather she had some problems, and
yeah, this is also I believe maybe I met her when she was like I was, and she was like a very young, but the later we just had the photos and information that I think it was during the high school times that she already had some kind of issues with the drugs and so on. That this is what was on our side, what I remember from my childhood. Yes, but I don't know the true story. Yes, so that was.
Vito did say he was driving her somewhere and she got very, very, very shaky. She drank vodka, which I don't think is good for you in quantity.
Okay.
But as I say, I never met her. I mean, the sad thing for me is, well, I grew up as an only child in a time when that was very almost frowned upon, because it was after the war, it was the baby boom time, and you were meant to go and have lots of children. And so the first question you were always asked if you met another child was, how many brothers and sisters have you got? And so I would always have to say, I don't have any, not knowing that I actually did, but they weren't any use to me. They were over the other side of the world. And then the response would be, oh, well, then you must be spoiled. My mum says that only children are spoiled. And I think, well, there's nothing I can do about it. I mean, I forced my mother to have more children, so anyway, yes. And
so,
also,
Stefanie, how many brothers and sisters do you have? How many did you count it? Because I don't really know. I'm just trying to count right now.
As far as I know, there was Stefanie born in 1954, Stefanie born in 1955, that's me. Yeah. Robin born in about, 59, 60, 19, something like that?
I'm not sure, yeah, early 60, yes.
Like I think he's about the same age as my cousin Robin. I have a cousin Robin in London as well. And then there was a big gap when presumably the ladies were on the pill. And then Kathy had Rory and Ivan in, I think, 1986 and 1987. And that means they are younger than my two daughters, who were born in 1981 and 1983. My younger one's turning 40 in another couple of weeks. So they have uncles who are younger than them.
Yeah. When I was in England, I was uncle, which was old. Yes, they were my uncles, which were older. Yes, which were younger than me. I know. Yes.
So as far as I know, there are only 5, and I've met all of them except obviously Stefanie. But there was this other one called Sebastian, but Kathy thought, or Kathy believed, that he was not Stefan's child. I think he was the child of one of the the what was their name? He married two Polish ladies, both with the Christina. That's right.
Christina, the first one. Yes.
Yes, one of them. And Kathy said, look, he didn't look like any of you. He had brown eyes and looked quite different. And there, although I mean, I really look more like my mother's family, but there's a sort of, you can sort of see we're related.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently he didn't. So she was pretty sure that he was actually the result of a fling that Christina, I don't know which one it was, because those two are confused in my mind. But
okay, I will try to figure it out, because this is first time when I hear this name Sebastian.
Well,
I never heard about it.
I'm not sure how true even that, because Kathy wasn't sure of it, but she was adamant that he wasn't Stefan's child, whoever child he was, whether he was one of the Christina's children or not. It's just that apparently Stefan got very interested in, where was it? It was some school, and he started going off to visit this school, and she couldn't figure out why.
You mean in Torun, the school in Torun?
No, I don't know. No, somewhere in England.
Ah, okay.
So I really don't know. And and Kathy isn't certain, but she was certain that it wasn't, whoever he was not Stefan's child. So as far as we know, there's only five.
Five, yes.
Only five, yes. Three.
Yeah, I believe it's more, but it's just a matter of time. I'm unsure, but I have this feeling like if you are living the artist life, and especially this what you said, like he has to cover these problems that he got in early stage of his life, then why not? Yes. Why not?
Obviously, highly fertile. That's quite excellent genetic material.
Yeah, I believe that all the artists, it's like if you look on the artists, that's the typical life. Yes, I would say so.
Seems to be obligatory. But Polish airmen also had quite a reputation during the war after it, and
yeah, because it was, I think it was not the quality but the quantity. I would say so, because if you just imagine how many young men were just outside of Poland fighting here and there, then yeah, I think that the quantity was really like a high quantity. Yes. And still, like if you compare, for example, the nations from Europe, I think we are still the first one abroad. So I mean, like if you just compare how many Polish citizens living abroad, I think it's the same or more than in Poland.
That's like New Zealanders. New Zealanders also go all over the world because we're so far from anywhere. It takes so long to get there. Even from Australia, it's 4 hours minimum. We're a long way from anywhere. So when we travel, we tend to
stay for longer.
yeah, and go further. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you don't have, and your mother didn't have any other contacts than the letters, and you don't know probably about the letters?
He never wrote back to her.
Never wrote back. Wow.
But he kept.
That's very sad. Yeah.
He obviously kept that photo of me, because I'm pretty sure I know the one it was, because my grandmother was particularly fond of it. And he knew who I was when I turned up. But and he exerted all his charm. He was a great charmer, was Stefan. He was delightful to talk to. I can see why he had the success that he did. And my daughters worshipped him because, apart from anything else, he allowed them to have 2 ice cream desserts at the restaurant where we met in Soho. It was somebody he knew who owed him money, I think. And my daughters were never allowed 2 puddings, and they got these 2 puddings. They were about 7 and 9 at the time, and it was just the best thing ever. So they remembered him with huge fondness.
Yeah.
And
I think Stefan tried to spoil everyone.
yeah,
That's true.
and I think that was one of his troubles, perhaps, because he really did not want to hurt anyone's feelings, but his life was so complicated that he could not avoid doing that.
Okay.
We met him. Colin and I and the 2 girls went. We spent 6 months mostly in England in 1990, and that was where I met him twice. And then Colin was a musical instrument dealer, among other things.
Mm-hmm.
In 92 and 94, he went back to London to get his brother out of various. Again, his side of the family is also quite complicated in a different way. And the last time he saw Stefan, they had an epic day in London. They went to the Royal Academy, they went to various galleries, they went to various restaurants and pubs, and they got, both of them, uproariously drunk. My husband was 6 feet tall and weighed about, I don't know, he was very slight. He was very, very slim, slight man. And I think Stefan kind of drank him under the table. But it sounded, they had a wonderful time. The next morning might not have been quite so quite so good, but no, they had a wonderful time. But I didn't go because it's expensive to go so far with a whole family, so I went the once. And then in 1996 he must have died a couple of days after I arrived, and I tried to get hold of him, not knowing what had happened, and I rang, and finally I left a message, and Kathy picked that up on the answer phone and rang. Because I was staying with my uncle and aunt, and she said, "Oh, well, you must come to the funeral." And it was that morning. Now, in those days, I was quite a fast runner. I still run, but I'm very slow. And I borrowed £20 from my aunt. I sprinted to the West Hampstead tube station. I leapt on a train, which was just about to leave. I went to, I think it's Victoria, where the Surrey trains leave from. Again, the train was about to leave, and if I hadn't been able to run so fast, I would not have caught it. I found out later that Kathy never expected me to turn up. She didn't think I'd come. There's a certain, the English are very good at issuing false invitations, and but we New Zealanders are very literal-minded. If someone says you must come to something, we say, "Oh, all right," and we'll make every effort to get there. So I did. And then afterwards, I remember saying to her, "There's no script for this. What do you say to someone who's been married to your father and doesn't know you existed?" And so I went a few days later and had lunch with her and Yvonne. She brought Yvonne in, because, as I say, Yvonne remembered my mother. And yeah, so
Yeah.
I mean, I get on well with Kathy, but I can see why other people might not. And I think I've had the advantage in all of these relationships of living 12,000 miles away. And so whenever we see each other, we're on our best behavior. And you know,
For one day, you can do the effort. Yes, this is what you meant.
no,
Okay.
a bit longer than that.
Okay.
But you know, it's just that, yeah, I wasn't there when all the, as Kathy said, you were there when all the shit happened. And I said, well, no, I wasn't. No.
And
So
what do you refer by the shit
I
happens?
don't know. I think the problems they had with Stefanie, I think that was what I was referring to. And her death, and I mean, which must have been devastating for the family, really.
Yeah. I think it was. I remember Stefan was very upset about it, and it was like, yeah, I think that it's a point where you are useless as a father, and yeah, because it's going too far already, and also I believe that the way how he, yeah, the art way, the way how artists behave, it's just leading kids in this direction somehow. Yes, so maybe that could be also some kind of feeling that he has. It was tough. It was really tough. Yeah. Later, we never spoke about the Stefanie. It was very strange on the, yeah, because we spoke. It was like quite funny. Stefan was very entertaining. So it was quite funny in general, but it was like subject that never exists. It was only one Stefanie photos which is still somewhere in my collection, and it was only one from her, I believe. 12 years old, 13 years old.
Right.
Nothing else. Yeah.
I've seen the ones that Claude has. Have you met Claude?
Not in person. I know about Claude. Maybe we met Claude once. I have to check. I have to check with my mother, with someone because if I met Claude, it was like I was like, I don't know.
Yeah. And he would have
before,
been, because how old would Claude be? I think he must be he's a bit younger than my daughters, so he must be in his mid-30s now, mid to late 30s. Yeah, he's actually a lovely young man. He's got a very buoyant nature. You know what I mean? He's not. I mean, it sounded as though he really had quite a tough childhood, and he's severely dyslexic. He finds reading and writing still very, very difficult, very practical, good builder and carpenter, but not good with reading, writing, or those sort of basic literacy skills. But he lives in the west of Ireland. He's got about 5 kids. Married to a lovely Irish woman, and I met him. We got to know Roy Law, who was Stefanie's husband. That's right, Stefanie's ex-husband, and Claude's father.
Yeah.
And when Roy died, his daughter and Claude went to Hamilton Island off the coast of Australia and scattered his ashes. And Colin and I were invited to go. So we went and we had a holiday, and we all had a lovely little ceremony and scattered Roy's ashes, because Roy had turned up in New Zealand, decided to track me down. And when he was travelling to Australia, he came over to New Zealand and turned up. And so we had a very entertaining. He was an entertaining fellow too. So I met Claude then, and he was pretty young. That must have been about. That was just after my mother had died, so that was about 2015, something like that. And then in 2017, on our way to Poland, we went to Ireland, and we were going to go over and visit to the west of Ireland and visit Claude and Mary and the baby. They just had another baby. But Colin got very ill. So the week we were in Dublin, he spent in hospital. And Claude drove all the way over with his two older children to Dublin to visit us and visit Colin in hospital and sort of, I've never forgotten it because it was a very kind thing to do because I was there on my own. I had to ring all the family and tell them Colin was in hospital. I didn't know what was going to happen to him. In the end, they gave him a thorough going over and changed all his medication. They said he'd been on the wrong medication, and he perked up quite a bit, and that was why we were able to go to Poland and enjoy it. But no, I have a lot of time for Claude. I think he's a super young man. There does seem to be in the family a very kindly spirit. Because they were wonderful. Your mother and your and your aunt, yes, cousin.
Małgosia, the second Małgosia, you mean?
We're both, and Vitek was too.
Yeah. So how many times did you met Stefan?
Only twice, and that was in 1990. The first time I met him in a restaurant in Highgate because we were staying with Colin's brother in Highgate in
London. In London. In your brother of your mother, yes. So
okay. So at that stage in 1990, it was because we came over with the whole family. We stayed with Colin's brother who lived in Highgate. When I came back in 1996, when Stefan died, I was staying with my aunt and uncle, but they live in a small flat in West Hampstead. So the whole family couldn't have, we wouldn't have stayed. So I met Stefan first by myself, and we talked for about 3 hours, I think, possibly more, in a restaurant in Highgate, because again, somebody he knew, somebody who owed him money, someone who had paintings of his on the wall. And then a few weeks later, we met in Soho, and that was when my little girls and Colin met him as well. And it was very jolly, yeah. So only twice, yes, and in that quite small space of time. And of course, I didn't think he was going to drop dead in 1996 because I had already written to him and said, "Oh, I'm going to visit again."
Yeah. It was the same on our side. Yes, so nobody expected, to be honest. Yeah. So yeah. Looks like he was in the the work as usual, I would say. So, yeah.
And what was sad for me when he died was that I realized I knew him so. I mean, what I was sad about was the potential of a relationship, because there wasn't really a relationship that really didn't exist. I mean, two very amiable meetings. That was all. It wasn't anything like a normal father-daughter relationship. And you know, I mean, I don't resent that. I don't feel cheated or anything, because you know, my life's been all right. I haven't sort of suffered terribly through not having a father. I probably wouldn't have married someone 16 years older than I was if I, you know, things might have been a little bit different, but you know, I'm quite happy with how things have worked out, really. Not too bad.
Yeah. And so it's quite interesting, yes, how, because on our side, so as I told you, there was some kind of gossip that there is someone somewhere and so on. But I thought, knowing the other stories, like the, you know, that he supports Robin, for example, and so on, I thought that there is some kind of support and contacts between you and Stefan and so on. No, I never expected that. It's like that for 35 years. No show of our sign for life, something like that. Yes, so that's really strange.
I was in England as a student in the late 70s, 77, 78. And I had it in my mind that I would contact him and go and see him. But I chickened out. I got cold feet. I was afraid of being rejected. And I also felt I wasn't sort of strong enough in myself to cope with that if he did say, you know, go away. Whereas when I was 30, when I was married with a couple of children and I'd done various things, and I thought, well, you know, if he tells me to get lost, I'll cope with that. I won't be. But of course, I didn't realize because my mother's picture of him, I mean, for one thing, when she knew him, he was young and I think quite desperate in many ways, you know, trying to get himself established and trying to succeed. And I mean, it's a very tough life being an artist, I think, especially in those beginning stages. And of course he had all the war stuff to deal with, and he dealt with it, I think, through the art. But she remembered him as being rather, I suppose, she always used to say if she was feeling angry with me, she would always say I was like him, and that I was not sufficiently warm or affectionate, and so I wasn't quite sure what to expect, and so I met this, you know, when I was 35, I met this ruddy-faced, exuberant, delightful, secretive man. You know, I mean, he wasn't going to tell me. He didn't tell me about Stefanie. I didn't know anything about her until I found out all this stuff after he died. So, he found out all about me, but I didn't find anything out about him that he didn't want to tell me.
Yeah, that's the way how you can still have a happy life, yes? Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible. Okay, Stefanie, so sorry, I have to go because we yes. Can we have another meeting like in 5 days or something like that? Yes.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay, that would be great, because that's because I didn't tell you why what we are doing in Bulgaria and what is the reason of this meeting as well. So I'll just do a short brief right now.
Yeah.
So in the museum in Belgrade that you didn't visit because it wasn't existing in 2017.
Right.
So the museum was existing, but there was no exhibition about the Stefan.
Right.
Yes. So we had a temporary exhibition like 2 years ago, and now we are doing some kind of like mini exhibition. I wouldn't say that this is exhibition. It will be like 5-6 paintings and this kind of micro space for Stefan, but it will be permanent. That's something good. And yeah, so it will be like a place for Stefan there. And also this what will be probably end of the month, I hope so. We are going to place one of his like art, like Emily. Yeah, so it's like Emil on metal on the city hall in Belgrade. It's not really a big one. That's something that I figured out to buy on the auction in UK. So it's like almost 2 meters on 130. But anyway, it's just what we have, and we are going to place this there. And we are like counting on some kind of feedback about the Stefan lives and so on and so on. So that's something that we are like gathering materials for all this. And yeah, and this is also why I had this some kind of questions about how did you met him and so on and so on, because it's still like a very tricky for me, all this family life or Stefan. It's really like yeah. I think for him, as you said, for him it was the 50s and 60s. I think were very difficult. Yes. So if you just imagine how far he is from the family, he cannot travel to Poland. He don't know if his father is alive. What happens with his brothers, because one of them is still in the Siberia. So I think it was quite difficult, the 50s. Yes. And if you read the book,
which
yeah,
I have yes, I have a copy of The Square Sun. My mother bought it. Yes.
Yeah, and do you have it with the cover with this because I didn't found any book from Stefan which still have this teeny cover.
Yes, it's got a dust jacket now. Where is it? Because I've had to move my books.
That's for the next time. Yeah.
Next time I find it, and
yeah. I have one. I have one as well. I bought it somewhere on the eBay, but it's just the green cover without this paper cover around it. Yes.
Yes. There's a painting of his in the gallery in Wellington, the New Zealand National Art Gallery in Wellington. But that's another story too. I'll tell you that.
Okay. Yeah, because that's also some kind of question that I would like to ask, because yeah, there is some art in New Zealand from Stefan. Yes.
Only one piece. Only one piece in a gallery, as far as I know. I have two, three. One that my mother brought with her in 55, and a couple of small pieces that Kathy gave me, because I had nothing. The rest of the family did have some. Well, I had the one that Peg had, but I think there are some in Australia. I think Melbourne, one of the Melbourne museums has got one. I must ask my daughter. She lives in Melbourne. Both my daughters live in Melbourne. Yeah. Okay. Look, it's been lovely talking to you.
Sure. Yes. It was nice to connect, and I believe it. I was thinking about some kind of Facebook group for the family. What do you think about it, or it's a stupid idea?
No, it's not stupid, but it's worth a try. But I one of the things yes, there are certain people who won't speak to each other, which is.
I know. I also have difficulty to communicate with some of our family members, and I understand why. Yes, I understand why, and I understand the reasoning between it, and also trying to, keeping the heritage as it is and so on. So yeah, I understand the reasons, but
Yeah.
I don't have to follow. Yeah, so
No, well, this is it. I think you're one generation away from the sort of the difficulties, perhaps, and I am 12,000 miles away, and it gives us a certain amount of freedom, I think.
yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you for getting in touch. That was really good, and I hope you do.
Thank you,
I hope you do
Stefanie, as
make
well.
to.
Yeah, and I didn't tell you, but already that there is they disassembling this mural in Torun, and I believe I will go there. I already spoke with the lady from the museum, which is responsible for the renovation, and I think so. I will just drive there to see how this goes and what they do and so on. She wasn't happy, to be honest, because it was like, yeah, someone is coming and checking what we are doing. So she wasn't happy. But yeah, I think so. We will have the agreement how to do it. So okay. So if I have something, I will just share with you, and we'll see how. Okay. And I will, yeah, let's be in touch in, I don't know, 2, 3, 5 days for next conversation. Okay. Okay. So thank you so much.
Oh, no,
Thank you. Have
great.
a good evening already on your
Yes.
side. And
Evening. Have a good
my
day.
side.
Yes. All right.
Thank you. Bye.